Hi folks, welcome to another edition of My Life with Robert Burns. Jim Thompson and Douglas Mackenzie here again to talk to one of our cronies from around the Burns world. Tonight's guest is a past president of the Robert Burns World Federation Limited and also a past president of Irvine Burns Club. Cronies everywhere, please welcome tonight's guest, Bill Nolan.
Good evening. How you doing, guys?
We're doing great. How are you doing, Bill?
I'm okay, yeah. It's, as I said, it's been a difficult week for us at Irvine because Jim Butler has died, our piper. Great bloke. So in passing, I'd just like to remember him. Lovely guy.
Thanks for that, Bill. Bill, you said you'd watched a few of the podcasts, so you know that the way in which we always start off is to ask a simple question. Bill, can you please tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, sure. I was born in Saltcoats. I don't tell many people that, but I was. And my family's pedigree with a name like Nolan was clearly Irish. And in fact, my grandmother was born in Dublin. And so, as I took great delight in pointing out later in my life, I was actually qualified to play for Ireland. Somebody said to me, why did you not? I said, for the same reason that I did play for Scotland. I wasn't good enough. But no, it was because of that, we had a culture that was a musical culture, certainly at home, but it was as much Irish as it was Scottish. And I think that was quite often the case with immigrants who came over. And my parents were musical. And my mother played the piano, played it well, and sang. And my dad sang, and he did like comedy. Well, he called it that, but I didn't say too much about it. But not a lot of Burns was taught in the school, nor was there an awful lot of Burns in my home. There was a bit, but not much. And in the school, in the primary school, we did choral songs like Ye Banks and Braes, Coddy Yows, Coming Through Their Eyes, Scots for Hay, and we belted them out every year faithfully at the Ayrshire Music Festival in the town hall of Ayr. But we knew very little about the man who wrote them, Robert Burns. And in my case, that remains so until we moved forward to January in 1959. And we went on a school outing to the theatre in Ayr. Now, I don't think it was the Gaiety. There used to be another theatre in Ayr. The Civic. And we went there. And there was a musical play on the build-up to Burns's bicentenary. And I was in S4 then. It was a musical play with singing and dancing to Burns songs and tunes. I think it was called, but I could be quite wrong here. I think it was called There Was a Lad. And I can remember vividly, and this is how crazy it was, I can remember the programme. The programme was a black and white programme, and they had a drawing of Burns at the plough in the front cover. And I always remember that. And I saw it quite recently in the Irvine Burns Club, and I found it quite emotional, just to go back like that. I went along there, open-minded, and I had a girlfriend with me, and we fell out because I quite fancied the lass who was playing Jean Armour and was giving her far too much attention. And the problem we had was that this lassie and I had won the Ayrshire Festival with an animated dramatised version of Thomas the Rhymer. So there wasn't much rhyme that night. We just, yeah. But so much for young love when I was tempted away by an actress whom I can't even remember what she looks like now, but it was enough. Buns came into my life then when I was about 15, 16. And it was a bit unexpected. And as I just said, it came at a huge sacrifice. But I can remember on the 25th of January, 1959, it was a Sunday, and I travelled by bus to Alloway to visit Burns's cottage. That was from Saltcoats. And that was a huge expedition for a wee boy from Saltcoats. Changing buses in Ayr. Remember, my mother said, you stay in the green bus till you get to Ayr, and then you get the red bus to Alloway. So I was thank God I'm no colourblind, but there you go. And I went on my own because I couldn't sook up to my now ex-girlfriend and say to her, would you like to come to Alloway to Burns's cottage? I mean, I was maybe daft, but I wasn't totally stupid because I can't see her falling for that one. And so on a cold, crispy January Sunday, I went to Alloway. First time I'd been in Alloway, and came off the bus and went into Burns's cottage. Now, I don't know even today why I went there at all those years ago. I don't know what motivated me to do that. Because as I say, we were not into Burns in a big way at home. Saltcoats or Drogheda, Stevenson area was not big Burns country at all. I mean, it's not like other parts of Ayrshire, particularly Irvine and the Garnock Valley, and down where you guys are in New Cumnock. But we didn't have that tradition, didn't have that culture. And if I was seeking inspiration by going to Alloway, well, I hate to tell you, but it was a miserable failure because it didn't motivate me at all to turn my musical interest to Burns songs. I could play them on the piano, and I'd been taking piano lessons for I was about 7. And I think I'd reached about grade 9 at the Guildhall School of Music and Drama. That sounds marvellous. But I did that, and I was distracted because I really didn't like the piano, I suddenly realised. And age 15, at 16, that didn't surprise me because it was a hell of a clumsy thing to cart about with you when you were going to parties, this great big piano. And in addition to that, it was certainly not cool to be playing the piano. Well, unless you were Jerry Lee Lewis or something like that, but it certainly wasn't for me. And so I took up the guitar and went everywhere with the guitar. And when you could belt out things like Dixie Darling, skiffle songs, you only needed to know 4 chords and you were away. Chewing Gum Blues and its flavour, the Putting on the Style, the legendary songs of Lonnie Donegan and Huddy Ledbetter. But again, it was a very odd experience because there must have been very few skiffle bands in Ayrshire in which there were 2 members in the ranks who could actually read the dots and the lines and could read the music. I don't know if I got as many gigs, but it helped us and it was better fun. So here it was, I turned my back on my culture yet again.
And before you move on, we need to know what this band was called.
Oh, that particular band wasn't called very much. No, that wasn't the legendary band that ended up with. I'll tell you more about them later. This was a band, I'm not sure I had the name. The Rocking Horses or some something stupid. But anyway, by that time I was into this pseudo-American music. And going, yeah, right, yeah. Probably that was influenced by lasses with ponytails and dirndl skirts. And the fact there was a lot of them based at the American base at Presswick. And that didn't help when someone in your class at school. And I was into this pseudo-American culture until I met a guy from Springburn called Joe Gordon, who was a neighbour of my aunt in Ballarnock. Now, Ballarnock was a postpart of Springburn, so my aunt believed. And Joe Gordon had a group called the Joe Gordon Folk Four. And they had a regular programme, what was old home service. I never missed it. It was on a Saturday night. At that time, Rory and Alex McHugh, you maybe remember them, they were singing on television twice a week, singing Scottish folk music. Robin Hall and Jimmy McGregor were on every night, along with Cliff Mitchellmore. And others were coming in from nowhere, like Alex Campbell. I thought he was American for a while, and then I discovered he came to Partick. Josh McRae, who came from Kirkcaldy, he spoke about Japan and different accent. And then there was a wee guy for the Carlton in Glasgow called Matt McGinn, and fell in with Thieves and Vagabonds there. By this time, I am thinking, what am I going to do with my life? I sure as hell I'm not going to play a guitar. I've got to do something. And I want to go to university. And I heard of a guy in Edinburgh, Hamish Henderson, who was at he founded the School of Scottish Studies. And Hamish Henderson was a folk song collector of some note. And I'm not going to pretend that on a moment of inspiration, I went to Edinburgh University to meet up with Hamish Henderson. But I did meet him, and he was a total inspiration. And around that time, I also met up with three guys and a woman, the Corries and Paddy Bell. And then there was Roy Guest and Bungee's coffee shop in the High Street in Edinburgh. Edinburgh was buzzing with music, with folk music, and we were in the midst of the revival. Now, I suddenly realised at one point, I'm doing the same with Burns. I'd gone to Edinburgh straight from Ayrshire. It wasn't subliminal, just a sheer fluke, because it hadn't dawned on me for a while that Burns actually left Ayrshire and went to Edinburgh for a wee while. And it didn't dawn on me either, and this may sound strange, coming from Irvine with the background that I now have, but I was not quite unaware, but I wasn't far off it, that Burns had spent some time in the Royal Borough of Irvine. Now, that wasn't the fault of the Irvine Burns Club, because at that time, the Irvine Burns Club was reinventing itself. And they had just been given the premises at Wellwood. And they weren't quite sure what to do with it. I had nothing to do with it. I was getting away. I was going to Edinburgh. So I had very little to do with it at all, like nothing. And I can't blame them for that. That was my fault. I didn't get into Burns songs. I didn't get into this verse speaking competition. Nah, that wasn't cool. Not at all. I played the guitar in a skiffle band and was playing sometimes in a rock band. So that was just a different type of animal. And I didn't know that much about Burns. As I said, it wasn't exactly a household topic in Saltcoats. And he was a strange sort of shadowy figure who in popular culture at the time, and I now know that it was wrong and quite wrong. A man that took a dram, got a few lasses into bother, generally viewed as a wee bit of Jack the Lad. Not exactly what you would call as a role model for young men coming through. And that was just the way it was. Now, part of that problem was that Burns was not the real Burns that I was interested in and who would hold my attention. The Burns who held my attention was the man who wrote music, who wrote songs, who wrote poetry. That was the Burns. And when I found that, and I was aware of his songs, some original, some adapted, it was at that time that I really started my life with Robert Burns.
Very good. You managed to weave a Burns story there and among a bit of a story about how your education developed and your life developed. But maybe you can take us a wee bit further. And what did you do at Edinburgh University? And
well, I'm going to come
to,
in Edinburgh. Edinburgh really turned me on to Burns because I was reading English literature. Now, why did I go to Edinburgh? And I didn't go to Edinburgh because of Hamish Henderson. I went to Edinburgh and all my pals, everybody at school with me in my area, they got the minute to 8 train in the morning to Glasgow and got off it, went to university and get the 10 to 5 train at night and they come back. And I thought, don't fancy this very much. And I wanted to get right into the university and be part of it. And so I opted for Edinburgh. And I had the courses I was looking for, but the classes I was looking for. So I read geography, economics, economic history, and geography. And so I had what would have been called fairly broad education. And I came out with an honours degree at the end of it, so I must have done something right to do that.
And was that degree in English, did you say?
A part of it was in English, yes. Part of it. Part of it was in Scottish history as well, because I knew nothing about Scotland. I knew nothing about Scottish history. And I wanted to do a culture course, and I did that as well. And so that was great to do that. But when it really worked for me was, and I want you to imagine this scene. I'm in my first year, in the first term, in an English class. And we're in the tutorial, because Edinburgh had a tutorial system, whereby you had the big classes for the lectures, and you broke into smaller classes for tutorials. And I was in the tutorial class with a woman called Dr. Janet Smith. I will never forget her. She had a bun in her hair. She had a sharp face, and she had a sharper voice. She was like Maggie Smith on a bad day. But she was absolutely riveting. She was amazing. And she took us through poetry. And we must have been into about October. And this time I'm settling into university fine. That meant I was in the football team. And so at that point, the classes were on the Tuesday, and that was your tutorial class in English. So I went along there, and it was all full of bright young things from Edinburgh colleges and Edinburgh schools. And she said at the end of one of the classes, now next week, we're going to be looking at one of Scotland's outstanding romantic poets. Nobody said boo. And she said, Bill, you're from the West, aren't you? I said, yes. She said, well, in that case, you know about Robert Burns. And I'm going, oh, no, this is a disaster turning into. And she said, so I'd like you to lead the class discussion next week on one of Burns's poems. And I must have been absolutely chalk white, because she said, well, pick any one you want and take the class through it and be prepared to educate some of these Edinburgh snobs on the Scottish language. And they have forgotten and turned their back on. There was no way, Douglas or Jimmy, I could have got out of that without losing face. So I did it. What point did I pick? I picked a point that had a story, had a beginning, a middle, and an end. And I picked his greatest tale of them all, Tam O'Shanter, a tale. I didn't even consider the possibility of memorizing it in the space of a week, but I read it as a tale, and I moved about and did things, and I got into the language of it and the flow of it and how it changed and how Burns used English in the middle and changed the tempo and so on. And all that was important. And at the end of it, I knew that something had happened because everybody applauded. And that was unheard of, including these Edinburgh lasses. If only one of them had been in the Civic Theatre near that night, I might have had a better life. Anyway, but there it was. I tried to get behind the drama and the language and the flow, and I did it with Tam O'Shanter. It's still my favourite Burns poem, and it served me well that day in the university. So that was a major breakthrough for me to do that and to get it.
So after university, what did you go on to do?
Well, I left university when these guys had absolutely a nice degree that trained me to do nothing. I had a liberal arts degree in an MA, and I really wasn't trained to do anything. And I thought, well, what am I going to do? And I had a cousin that was a town planner in Lanarkshire, and he said, oh, you don't fancy getting into planning? And I said, well, don't know very much about it. So he talked to me, and I went away and applied to Cumbernauld. And it was unbelievable because we went there in the final year on an outing, and I met somebody in Cumbernauld, and I just brass neck. And I said to him, you're not looking for any young planners, are you? Trainees or anything like that? And he said, aye, funnily enough, we are. He said, you fancy it? And I said, yeah. And that's how I got in. And I went to Strathclyde University and did a postgraduate course in it. But the tale gets more bizarre because I realised after a wee while that I didn't fancy planning because I didn't like the attitude of councillors, planners, and little petty Hitlers who are going to run the world. And that was my downfall at times. I just opened my mouth. But I came out of there and I went then to IBM because I believed that the future lay in computers. And I was fairly numerate. So I went to IBM as a trainee systems engineer. And I lasted a year at IBM. I was supposed to be they were supposed to be training me as an engineering writer. And that wasn't what I was getting trained as. They were using me as a programmer. And that was not on. And I wasn't happy with that. So in a moment when you never actually know why you do things, I picked up an article in the Scotsman one Saturday, and it was about a new town opening up in Ayrshire, in Irvine. And I dropped them a line, and they took me. And I went there again in a kind of bizarre job doing research. But then they discovered they needed somebody to look after PR. They were in an area that they had to get someone who spoke the local language and could communicate with the local community. And a lot of the guys were from south of the border, some from overseas. And I knew a lot of these guys who are now in positions of influence on the council and so on. I remember them. And so I was quite happy to go and talk to them. And I spent the next 12 years there in Irvine. And then after that, I was headhunted because PR was coming into its own. And I must have done all right. And ended up at Tennant's as head of communications. And I was there for a while. Tennant's was the equivalent of me turning professional as a drinker. Because I drank Tennant's lager. And I just turned professional and got behind the brand. And it was wonderful. And it was a great company to work for. And I worked for Tennant's. I looked after Scotland, Ireland, the Republic of Ireland, and the province of Ulster. And that was during the time of the Troubles. And nobody said, what's it like? I said, well, it's all right. I never see any trouble. I never do. And I never, in the 10 years, I was floating in and out of Ireland, of Belfast. And we had a brewery, and I was handling PR for there. We had a brewery in the Glen Road, at the top of the Falls Road in Andersontown. So we were in, let's say, firing range, but nobody did anything. They weren't going to damage the brewery. We knew that. Really stupid. But I never had a shot fired in anger, and it was a great time. The company was big company, reorganizes, and they then wanted to move me to London. That was the moment when I said, no, thank you. I am not going. End of story. I'm staying in Scotland. That's where I want to stay. I want to live here. And I went out on my own, set up my own company, and the rest is history.
That's a great point for us to start talking a bit more detail about your interest in Burns. I know we've already gone there in various stages during your life. So Jim Thompson's first question, which is normally, how did you first come across Burns, isn't going to get answered this time, because we already know that. But we'll start talking a bit more about Burns, get Jim to have a chat with you about that. And then we need to come back to what you did later on, because there's a sporting connection there that we need to explore. Okay, Jim, over to you.
By the way, Jim.
There's one or two things we need to explore, but we'll come back to that later on. But I mean, just to start with, I mean, you need to tell everybody about your involvement with Irvine Burns Club, because I think you've had every Joe Burn the Sun in there.
Well, funnily enough, when I went back to Irvine to work with the Development Corporation, I ended up coming into the Burns Club. And within a very short space of time, I became president. And you do 1 year as president, and then you move on. And if you've behaved yourself and they think there's somebody else to offer, they'll make you a director. So they made me a director, and I've been there ever since. I took over as secretary about 5 years ago, when I came back to base myself, because I had about 12 years when I travelled the world, and I was never in Scotland. I should have lived at the end of the runway. But I suddenly found myself in a situation where I had time, and I was going to be able to do it, and I was able to dedicate myself to Wellwood. And that's what I've been doing since then. And it was when I was doing Wellwood, I'd started it, and Jim phoned me, and I ended up, well, I'll tell you honestly, I've said it before, Jim, nearly fell off my chair. I mean, he said, will you help us? And when you told me what I was supposed to do, you want my help for, I thought, wait a minute, that's not what I could help. And so I ended up coming into the Federation and took it from there. I had a challenge in the Federation. I knew that the Federation had been A wee bit upside down for a wee while, and we're on the wrong. I always believed that the potential, but they were on the wrong road. And I came in, and I suppose because I was I'd come from industry, I had no baggage. I wasn't somebody that came out of a Burns Club. I'd come out of Irvine Burns Club, yes, but Irvine Burns Club is so different from everyone else because we've got these premises. So we've got to run that as a business. It's not like you can meet on a first Thursday of the month in a pub. Can't do that. We've got to run that as a business. And that's where I came from, with a business background, coming in to run the federation. And a great support, particularly Jim. Fantastic support there. And other good guys. There were a lot of good people. And I didn't achieve what I did on my own. I would never claim that. I had a good team with me and a lot of sensible people. And we did a lot of work.
Well, I've got to say, having the conference there in 2014, you were heavily involved with that, and I think that was probably the start of your engagement with the Federation. Yes,
it was. And that was one that I found very easy to do because I had been an event organizer, an event manager for a lot of companies as a freelance PR man, and I had done a lot of organization. And so therefore I could bring things to the party that I hope I brought, and I believe I did bring. And a lot of people reacted to it and were very positive. And the one thing, and I say this about myself, I don't hesitate about taking decisions. I'll take a decision. And if it's the wrong decision, then I'll follow, rise by it. But when you've got good people around you, the most loyal person you can get in this world is the guy in your team who says to you, "Hold on, Bill. Have you thought about, or have you thought about this?" He's not the guy that's challenging you. He's the guy that I believe is there to stimulate you. And I had guys like that at the Federation. And that worked well. And we did it well. We changed the conference, we changed the structure, and the conference then started to make money. And we got a lot of sponsorship. I always remember, and I'm not going to mention her name, but she, a lady from Irvine, who said to me one day, "Do you realize that this conference that you're running is going to bankrupt the Burns Federation?" And I said, "Why do you say that?" And she said, "Because when we were running the conference earlier, we were running cake and candy stalls, and we were bringing buy sales, and we were generating money. What have you done?" And I'd had enough. I said to her, "Well, you see, the problem is that we work in a different field." I said, "Now, I admire what you did, because that was what your skills were in." I said, "But would you believe that I'm sitting here with about 15 grand in sponsorship and support funding from local authorities and from other bodies?" Oh. I said, "You asked the question." I said, "I'm not trying to be smart." I said, "But you've got to run a business like a business." And that's what I believed in. And I think we did it, Jim.
Yeah, certainly. But I mean, you've spoken about Wellwood. I think it's important you tell the folk just what's at Wellwood and what's available to people.
Oh, yeah. Oh, at the moment it's not a hell of a lot, to be honest. We've been shut for 2 years and we're rebuilding Wellwood, and from the inside. But I've got a meeting tomorrow morning, and we're going to talk about how we're going to replan the museum inside Wellwood. and change the whole structure of the experience. We're going to change it to a Burns and Irvine experience, and it will focus on that. And we're going to be working with virtual reality. We're going to be working with a whole variety of high-tech people helping us, because we've got a company who's come in and said, we can do that. We said, let's try it. And we said, sure, we come in. The big thing we've got that's changing, and I'll find particularly sad. One of the great thrills to me and to everybody who came to Wildwood was that they came through the door, and if they were a Burnsian, it was a highlight of their visit to let them hold the Kilmarnock edition and get a photo taken with it. And people were shocked that we did that. You're not letting them hold the Kilmarnock edition. Yes, why not? Because that's what books are for. They're to be held and read and picked up. And we Burns clubs came, and I know that the Freeze House Club have got their own Kilmarnock edition, but that's involved the Freeze. And Davy Smith used to bring them to Irvine so they could handle ours. And that was great. And we did this with the school kids. We were getting 750 kids every year in January and into February coming into Wildwood, primary 6. And they handled the Kilmarnock edition. They then saw the original manuscripts of the first 6 poems in the Kilmarnock edition that had been handed over to John Wilson, the printer. And they had on them the printer's marks. Now, these are priceless. You cannot buy that. And we've got them, and they're in the vaults, because the first thing we did invest in was a massive big walk-in vault. And we've got this huge vault. It's got a series of locks on it. It's also thermometer and humidity controls in it. And it's just a professional job that's been done. Again, we're examined every year, well, until the last couple of years, by the National Library of Scotland. And they come in and they check our computer records, because everything's registered. They register the humidity, they register the temperature, and they look at the books, and everything there is scientifically controlled. So we do that, and they come in and they inspect us, and every year we got 2 marks for it. We also have a library of a lot of other books, Burns in other languages. We've got the only set, to my knowledge, that exists of first editions of the novels of John Galt. And when Angela Esterhammer, a professor from Toronto University, came over, she came to see that. And she looked at me and she said, you know, you've got something that I've never seen. And she's #1 in the world. She said, you've got something I've never seen. She says, I have never seen a complete set of John Galt first editions. She said, tell me, why have you not got them in the vaults? I said, well, they'll be in the vaults shortly because we just took them out. No, I don't think we realised there was a complete set of first editions. She wasn't out the door until Graham Hislop had them all, right? And they stayed there now. But we've got a lot of things like that. We've got original letters from Burns to Davy Siller. We've got other letters that we know now may well be facsimiles, but facsimiles are valuable. And Jerry Carruthers and his team do a lot of work with us in that. We've got a lot of things in there. We've got a lot of Burns material. We've got murals. We've got all sorts of things. And we just want to open the doors and let people in. The problem we currently have is that we're having to watch it, and touching the stuff is not going to be on. Well, we invested in a vault. Well, when I say we invested in it, we got it from a bank in Irvine that was closing. And we had a director in the club who was the regional bank manager. We got it for him. And it went in, and we put in the scientific equipment, the judging, the humidity, the temperature control, and everything. Things like that are priceless. You can't buy them. People say, what's you reckon they're worth? I wouldn't even think about putting a figure on it. It's impossible. But the big sadness for me is that for the time being, we're not going to be able to let members of the public handle the books until such times as it's determined safe to do so. We owe it to the world to preserve Burns literature, and we'll do it. And we might become very unpopular with some people, and we know that, but we've got to protect Robert Burns' works, and we do it.
It's fascinating, Bill, and I can vouch for that experience of Wellwood, because when I was in my 30s, it was a visit to Wellwood that triggered my real interest in Burns. So.
And we've seen an amazing reaction from people, people coming in who they get a photograph taken. We've got in the director's room, we have a picture of Burns, and they stand in front of it and get a photo taken. And one of the guys one day said, "We'll have to do something about that carpet." I said, "What? We have to do something about that carpet. It's getting all messed up with the stains of the greeting on it. What the tears are fleeing out of folk are going on to that carpet." Oh, that's how he got it. You see, you never noticed them. Andy O'Hagan, who's a pal, Andy's a great writer, and he came in to do a book, to do a documentary. It was the one where he filmed in Mauchline and Pussy Nancy's as well. And he came to Irvine, and Ian Doe was the president, brought through the Kilmarnock edition, and he handed it to Andy. Now, Andy O'Hagan is renowned on television for being a one-take specialist. If you say to Andrew, "Give me 2 minutes on," Andy O'Hagan will go, and he'll give you 2 minutes. Well, on the 5th take, I said, "Andy, come on, hurry up." He said, "Well, I've never felt like this." And he hadn't. He was not alone. We had others coming in. Seamus Heaney. Seamus Heaney came in, the Irish poet. He was just gobsmacked. He just kept saying, "Oh God, oh God, I can't believe it. My God, I can't believe it." And it's a fact. We're lucky, we're very privileged, but it's a huge responsibility that we're happy to take, and we'll run with it. It's not easy to run a business out of a museum because we don't get a lot of support from the public bodies. We get some, but not a lot. And currently, in the last couple of years, we must have lost money. And I know we have. But we'll come back, and there's no doubt we'll come back. And we got a lot of support from Glasgow University, and they've been very good with us. It'll be back in the Burns Trail. We'll be back in the Burns Trail after the 13th of April. And what we're hoping is, well, we know that the days of the casual visitor are over. They're long over. You'll have to come in now and get your tickets in advance, and then come in, and that'll be it. There'll be a restriction on the number of people. So we might have to chop and change things, get it different. what we're having to do is, we used to bring the school kids to us to see Burns. Now we're having to take Burns to the kids. And that's why we've spent a lot of time. And I take my hat off to Ian Dixon, who's done an amazing amount of work on the website. That was one of the great things in the pandemic. Ian Dixon revamped the entire website, along with support of 2 other guys. But Ian did it, and he made a great job of it. We take that out to the schools, we'll let them see it, and hopefully they'll come back in, bring their parents, bring their friends.
You're talking there about Wellwood, but you didn't mention one of the things I find quite unique about Irvine Burns Club. And you need to tell the folk out there about the signatures that you have and various letters.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. In 1826, the club was founded. By 1828, somebody had the bright idea that we should get honorary members, people who were, and funnily enough, and this is not a poor job, but I have here a wee book, and that is the Constitution of 1885. And in that, it defines honorary membership of the Burns Club. And it started off, it would be writers and people of that ilk who had brought fame and honor to Scotland, to Irvine, to the world generally. And then it grew bigger and bigger. And the first 2 were John Galt, whose letter came to us from New York, or came from Guelph via New York, and James Montgomery, who was a hymnist, a hymn writer, and a Christian poet who came from Irvine and who wrote hymns. And over the years, we've collected somewhere in the region of about 360 letters from honorary members. Because the one thing we say to people is, if you're going to be an honorary member, we'll write to you and we'll invite you to accept. Now, most people have accepted. 1 or 2 didn't. There's a couple didn't reply to it. But in the main, people say, yeah, and they send a letter of acceptance into us. And we've kept them. And we had an exhibition in 2009 for the Homecoming Scotland. And Ian Dixon and I fronted this up, and it was called Dear Mr. Burns. And it was about letters, and it was about people who had accepted. And I was in the club one day talking to school kids. The school kids are the great levelers of the world. And I was in full flight saying what a wonderful idea that was of our founder members, that they got these people to write acceptance letters. And I'm talking about people here like Charles Dickens, Browning, Tennyson, I'm talking about Scott, a lot of people, Shaw, George Bernard Shaw, American presidents, some British politicians, not that many, but some, 1 or 2 household names and some who would be household names. But, and I said to I was telling the class, I said, wasn't that a great idea that they had this, they believed that the way to capitalize on this was to get the people to write in their own hand. And the wee boy put his hand up, and I said, yes. He said, what other way was there? I said, what other way was there? If he didn't write, he didn't have typewriters, you know. I went, and they were 2 feet built, yes, straight out of the mouth of babes and children. And, but it's true. And most people, there are 1 or 2 who have given us typewritten letters, but very, very few. Of late, we've had people like Sean Connery, of the current crop, Chris Hoy. I can't prejudge my president, nor would I dare to do so, but it's significant that Rona Martin and her curling team, when they won the gold in America, they were made honorary members. So I think you can predict fairly sensibly who will be coming in soon. We've had knockbacks from the Pope. One of the Popes, can't remember what one. They said they didn't do it. We had a knockback from Brezhnev and Gorbachev. And the one that I found, and I took it as a great personal challenge, was to try and get Nelson Mandela. And the time I was in and out of South Africa, like a yo-yo, when Mandela was president. And I was supposed to meet Mandela. And I thought, oh, you're beauty. Because I really admired what the guy did. And I had a letter with me to say, Madiba, please, will you consider doing this? And he took ill and didn't turn up. And I never met him, nor did I get presented a letter to him, because it didn't go that far. So I think he's the one that got away, that I regret very much. But it's a great thing. We've had a lot in the recent years. Andy O'Hagan's won. But it's been something that Jimmy's right, that attracts attention, attracts a lot of attention. It's a fascinating subject in its own right to go through these letters. You could spend a long time doing it. And we do put them out, yes. It's a great indictment of the education system when we put out letters from somebody like Charles Dickens and Tennyson, and the Wayne say, who are they?
Right. I mean, you were at Tennis for years, and Wales is not related to Burns. They had an advert campaign that was absolutely, I mean, it was everywhere. And I dare say you've got to be involved in that.
Well, yeah, we spent a fortune on advertising, and we did very well. We had a good brand, we had a good product, and we had a good series of adverts. And of course, we had the Tennis Lager Girls on the cans. You wouldn't get doing it now. That would not be politically correct, I don't think. But it was a very good opportunity for these lassies, because I signed the expenses chits, and I know how much they were getting. And they got exposure on television, they got exposure, it did their careers no harm whatsoever. And they were very popular. And they were, the thing about them was, they were really nice girls. They were genuinely good people, and they were a laugh. You could go into a restaurant somewhere with me, with 4 lassies, and everybody went, who's he? I know. I didn't say anything. I just smiled. Said to a guy one night, look at me, I'm only 28.
Oh, yeah.
But no, the advertising campaign was great. It was a good side, but there was advertising of its day, and it moved on, and you do other things.
But did you go to all the locations?
Yes. Oh, it was murder. It was dreadful. I had to go to the Bahamas. I had to go to Seychelles, go to Hong Kong. Oh, dreadful places. Kenya, South Africa, Disney World. Then I went to good places as well, like Cooper, Balangry, Carden. Well, New Cumnock one night as well in the Croon, but that's another story, and I'm not going into that one. But we had a lot of things like that happen. I was lucky because I was paid to travel all over the world. And I was paid to travel around Scotland Somebody said to me recently, any part of Scotland you haven't been in? And I had to stop and think. No, I was really lucky, very, very fortunate. And I'm very grateful for that opportunity.
You wanted to ask Bill something about the songs of Burns, Jim.
Just you mentioned, Bill, that Tam O'Shanter was your favourite poem. I'd be keen to find out what your favourite Burns song was.
Oh well, there's two. I love two songs. A Kiss has to be, because I'm a real sentimentalist at heart. I know you don't believe that, nobody does, but I'm a softie. But the other one is, and I think this is true, and I think it applies, and he was a man ahead of his time, and that's Parcel of Rogues in the Nation. As a song, I think it's wonderful. First time I ever heard that song was by a guy called Dick Gaughan, and he sang it, and he was brilliant. And I say Parcel of Rogues, maybe Westland Winds. I like Westland Winds, great song. And A Kiss, I have to say that one.
You mentioned Parcel of Rogues there, and this is a no very good link, but I wanted to finish off with asking how you get involved in rugby.
Oh, well, I get involved in rugby at university because I played football in first and second and third year. And then I get fed up with it. And you're gathering by this, that when I get fed up with something, I move away from it. And so the guy said to me, no fancy playing rugby. They went, don't be daft. I've never held a rugby ball in my hands. But I did, and I converted to rugby. Then I came back. I kept playing. I played at Drawson, I played at Irvine. And I then stopped playing. Stopped playing when I was 40. And I went on to the committee of Glasgow Rugby. I went on to the board of Glasgow Rugby. I became chairman of Glasgow Warriors for a wee while. And I ended up eventually on the Scottish Rugby Union. And I'd been on there only a few years. And Alan Hosey from here said to me one day, he said, I'm going to be stepping down from the international board. When I say I'm stepping down, in actual fact, what it meant was he was stepping up. He was going to become the president of the union. He said, can I put your name forward? And I said, yeah, sure. And for the next 12 years, I was on the international board. I chaired the medical committee and the laws committee. And I was involved in, there were 8 of us in the executive who ran World Rugby. And 7 of them had captained their country. I hadn't played for mine. I was able to hold my own. My job was to defend Scotland's corner, and I did that for 12 years. And I stepped on then. I decided it was time to move on, bring someone else in, because I'd been brought in just at the start of the World Cup. And that year that I had, feeling my way in, was a good year. And I thought that whoever followed me should do the same. And I did that. I then was asked by the Murrayfield board, would I hold fire and go into the European board, European Union board, European Rugby Union, that is, not the EU. And I went on to that because at that time, some of our aspiring nations were getting a bit twitchy about who should be going where in World Rugby. And I was a nice guy. And I was in there as a diplomat. It was great. It was good fun. And I met so many people. I went so many places. I've still got great friends in rugby all around the world. It's a fantastic sport, and wouldn't have missed a bit.
Very good. We do extensive research for these podcasts, and I was reading an article in the newspaper in about 2013 where somebody had asked you the question that if you were on a desert island, what would be the 3 luxury items that you'd want to have with you? Can you remember what your answer was?
No, I can't actually, but
Well, I can
no,
tell you
because
it was
you see,
a set of good.
changes.
It was a set of good cooking knives.
That'd be right.
It was your guitar,
Yep.
and it was a fast boat to get back off the island.
Well,
And
I'm
I
a
thought,
pragmatist, you see.
That's probably because he wanted to go on with something.
Aye, I'm a pragmatist when it comes to that. It's like as well, you know, I love doing these panels. You've all done them. And so at the end of the panel, they say, who would you like to have met in the life of Robert Burns? And I was doing one night and I was getting bored. And I was last on. Who would you like to have met in the life of Robert Burns? And there were 2 women, another bloke and me. And the 2 women said, I'd love to have met Mrs. my co-host and ask them, did they do anything? I'm going, I'd love to have met Tam O'Shanter. Like, give me a guide. Well, like, yes. And then the 3rd one was, I can't even remember who it was. So it came to me. And the chairman said, and who, Bill, would you like to have met in the life of Robert Burns? I think I'd have liked to have met Richard Brown. I said, because I reckon the enemy that could teach Burns about drinking and women was my cup of tea, and he and I had some right good nights together.
Excellent. Well, what a way to finish off this episode of My Life with Robert Burns. And I just want to thank you, Bill, for telling us all about your life with Robert Burns.
No, Tom, it's been a great pleasure. Thanks very much, guys. I really appreciate it. Thanks a lot.